Welcome to Local Everywhere. I'm Cynthia Pooler, and my guest today is David Drotar, and he is the publisher of Brookview Press in upstate New York. So, David, tell us a little bit about your publishing house.
Brookview Press, I began around 2001, and we publish books in the narrative nonfiction genre, primarily nature, outdoor, and environmental topics.
So, and you've been writing for a while?
I have 49 years.
Okay. So, how do you get people to have their stuff published? Do you advertise? Do they come to you? How is that working?
Sometimes we advertise. A lot of it comes through agents.
Okay. Do you do primarily upstate New York?
No, we publish books with authors all over the world, all over the states and the world, actually.
Oh, great. So what are some of the books that you've published?
Well, we have Chasing Dreamtime by Neva Sulloway. It's a memoir of a young woman who starts out in the 1970s. She decides she wants to be the first woman to sail solo around the world. However, it doesn't work out quite that way. She gets into a lot of trouble and has a lot of harrowing experiences along the way.
Mm-hmm. And what else have you published?
Well, we published one of my own books called Steep Passages. I don't know if you can see that. I guess it's not coming through on Zoom. This is a collection of essays, narrative nonfiction essays that I began writing. And the title comes from the first essay of the book, Steep Passage. I had taken a trip in northern New Hampshire or northern Vermont. And in these little moments of time riding up the chairlift, you only have about 5 or 10 minutes, and you have a stranger sitting next to you.
Mm-hmm.
And so you might have little bits of conversation, and you might be traveling up the ski slope with a preschooler 1 minute and a senior citizen next, and everything in between. And I kind of realized that this was sort of a metaphor for life. The different passages that we make through life are pretty scary sometimes, and they encompass all ages. No matter what period in life you are, you're usually going through some type of passage or transition that may be a little frightening to you at times.
So have you always had a desire to write?
Pretty much. I was good at it in school. In college, I started taking some writing courses and literature courses. My degree is in biology and chemistry, so I have the science background. And it wasn't really until a few years later that I kind of put the two together. I realized that I could be writing about environmental topics as well as humans and people that are going through these various environments.
You obviously, since you do environmental topics, you obviously have a lot to choose from, right?
I do, yeah. I get to travel a lot myself. So obviously, all that I write and all that I experience does not go into a book. I publish a lot of single pieces as well. And when I say I publish, I mean other publishers publish my work on their website, on their newspaper travel section, a magazine, or whatever.
Have you had anything published locally, like in the Albany Times Union?
I have, yes. I did a horse packing trip in the Adirondacks, and that found its way into the Times Union.
Hmm. That must have been fun.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, they're all fun in some degree. Some are more difficult physically than others, but yes, they're all fun when you start making connections and speaking with people and getting different personalities and different perspectives, and then you realize how they might fit together in an actual story or narrative format.
I really loved the Adirondacks. My friend Russell and I, we went to Lake Placid during the summer, and I was in awe. We went up Route 9. And then we went to Keene Valley. It was just beautiful. Um, Doing a boat trip on the lake, and seeing all the mountains. Russell is a 46er, so he really enjoyed it.
My gosh.
Yeah, yeah. So, why don't you read one of your writings so people can hear what you've done?
Okay, yes, I'd love to. As I mentioned in my email to you, this story is called My Very Bad Italian Day. And when I say story, it's all true. It's a nonfiction narrative. Writers tend to use the word story for anything they write. But
Hmm.
swear to God, this all happened to me exactly as I've written it. And in the way of background, it takes place in Sicily, in the nation of Italy, and I had quite an experience there.
Hmm.
So here, part one: the brutal Mediterranean sun penetrated my light T-shirt that only seemed to intensify the heat and feelings of doom as the two officers led me into the police station on a cobbled street in Francavilla, Sicily. The heavy metal door clanged shut and locked behind me. Please sit here. The younger officer, Vasile Domenico, indicated a chair in front of two desks. A rack of rubber stamps sat atop one desk. It was slightly cooler inside the windowless room, but I kept sweating. It was a hot mid-September day, even by Italian standards. Are you sure you locked the car? He asked for the third time. Could I have been so careless as to leave the rental vehicle unlocked? There was no sign of a forced entry in the little silver Fiat. Backpack, jacket, and iPad aside, all I wanted was my passport. My mind retraced the entire day. The soft pinkish glow of dawn washing over Mount Etna had surrendered to the golden sun that cheerfully filled the courtyard of Bosco Ciancio, a rustic stone baglio, country villa in the volcano's shadow. The twisted gray trunk of a centuries-old olive tree stood in front of my room. Birds twittered in the crackly leaves of the surrounding chestnut forest, and I attempted some chit-chat with Pina, the German housekeeper, setting out breads, jams, and fruit tarts for the guests who came from Northern Europe. Maps spread across the glass and wrought iron table. I sipped coffee and planned my excursion. The day was filled with promise and adventure. My route was circuitous, but that was the fun of traveling around the rim of Europe's largest volcano. Puffs of gas streamed from Etna's cone across the cloudless blue sky. Perhaps I'd be lucky enough to see an eruption. Like an overprotective Sicilian mama, Etna's eye was always there, peering over the top of the crumbling castle turrets of Castiglione di Sicilia high above me, or peeking through clusters of ripening grapes on the valley floor. She steered me along stone walls with rows of overhanging prickly pear cacti dropping their squishy orange fruit. She must have taken her eye off me, however, when I pulled into the gravel parking lot at Gol dell'Alcantara. I gathered my camera, sunglasses, and hat, and prepared for a ramble through the spectacular gorge formed 8,000 years ago when the Alcantara River carved the hardened lava deposits. The day was already a scorcher, so surely I didn't need to carry a jacket or other bulky items. I tucked them safely out of sight in the car, or so I thought. I spent the next 2 hours wandering around the rim. I descended a trail to the Venus balcony where I got a closer look at the exotic rock formations. Legend has it that the love goddess bathed here in the river's warm water. However, one day her romantic trysts with the fire god Vulcan all went wrong, and he turned the water into an icy torrent as it entered the narrow gorge. Perhaps I got a little too close to the river's cruel curse myself. When I returned to the car, my pack was gone. Part 2. I glanced at my watch. It was 4 o'clock, and I had a 2-hour drive back to Bosco Ciancio over winding mountain roads. Darkness would come at 6:30 and transform them into an impossible tangle. There was little margin for error. My GPS was spotty at best, taking me through questionable routes and failing to recognize some roads altogether. But I had gotten here somehow, and now it was all I had. There was no way to drive around the public fountain outside the police station. I shifted the stick into first gear and shot straight up the vertical alley as the GPS's screen's bright pink line directed. Barely avoiding people and buildings within inches of my mirrors, I reached the top of the passageway and the engine light started flashing on the car's dash. Damn, I would deal with that later. I needed to keep moving, but the Roman gods of fate would have none of that. At the top of the hill, the engine raced as I shifted into second gear. The car balked, barely gaining speed as I floored the accelerator. Third gear was no better. The car had virtually no power in second and third gears. Nevertheless, I sluggishly looped through the narrow streets and hobbled out of town, making the sour memories of the theft seem trivial now. On the straightaways outside of villages, I down and upshifted repeatedly, trying to gain some necessary speed if I were to get home at all. The castle that had looked so quaint and seductive in the brilliant sunlight scornfully mocked me with its creeping twilight shadows. Even Mama Etna cast a disparaging eye. "You're having a vehicle breakdown. What are you going to do?" I thought I heard her say. Maybe I could get help. "You're miles away from anything and you can't speak a word of Italian, you fool. Besides, now you've got to pee," she reminded me, as only a Sicilian mother exasperated with her memoni for making some poor choices would do. I saw no way out of this. I dared not stop, lest I be unable to restart the car. On the downslopes, I could cruise slightly faster in second, third, and sometimes fourth gear. Back in first gear, I began limping up the winding mountain road away from Biancavilla, the last notable village on my route. I sensed that I was gaining altitude and getting closer to home, but after each turn, the GPS spitefully changed my estimated time of arrival. First 6 o'clock, then 6:30, then 7:30. Was I going in circles? Houses locked behind rusting iron gates hid in the forest. Then the engine stalled. Miraculously, the car restarted when I pressed the clutch and turned the key. I kept creeping along. Suddenly, I came to an intersection with another lonely road and saw a faded sign with an outline of a volcano and the hotel's name. The GPS directed me away from it. I chose to ignore the GPS and follow the sign. My hunch was correct. Several minutes later, as the sun dipped behind an apple orchard and the day's shadows performed their final dance on the simmering cone of Mount Etna, I saw the twinkling lights of the Baglio. Familiar faces were already gathering around for dinner inside the building's 4-foot thick stone walls. I collapsed under the massive stone arches. "Is everything okay?" Pina asked in her native tongue. Notwithstanding the fact that I was in Italy, my imperfect German pretty much summed up my very bad Italian day. Mein Pass ist gestohlen, I said. Mein Auto ist kaputt. Monday morning, Rome International Airport. Having spent the last 2 days texting relatives, making phone calls in Italy, and sending emails to the airline and the United States embassies in Palermo, Naples, and Rome to no avail, I stood in line waiting to board my flight without a passport. Why didn't you go to an embassy to get an emergency passport? The gate agent asked. By now, I knew the drill and was ready with an answer. I had already passed through no less than 8 other checkpoints and interactions in 2 airports, sometimes with animated annoyance, sometimes with pitiful concern, but each time they had let me advance to the next point. My passport was stolen in Sicily on Friday afternoon. There's no embassy in Catania, I recited. I bought a ticket to Rome on Sunday, but the embassy is closed on weekends. My flight home is Monday morning. Then I handed over my boarding pass, driver's license, the police report, and a passport photocopy that I had previously tucked into my luggage. Hundreds of other passengers stood in line behind me. Please step aside, the gate agent said. We need to call the States. I anxiously watched the other travelers file past me, but I took the businesslike protocol and lack of disdain as a positive sign. After all, they didn't turn me away. If I could get on the flight, they wouldn't stop a citizen at the border, would they? Oh, wait, my brother just texted something about a new wall. Funny guy. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the jumble of events that had occurred since my very bad day. Once I had returned to the Baglio, I called the rental company's emergency towing number and then watched the car being carted off through the dark of night. Refusing to bring a replacement, they told me I could pick up a new vehicle at the airport, over an hour away. I was dumbstruck. Now stranded in an area with no bus, taxi, or Uber service, how could I possibly get there? Isn't this why people rent cars in Sicily? But strangely, the ludicrous policy freed me to move forward. My physical possession of the disabled vehicle severed. The car was no longer my responsibility. I began talking in English with the staff and other guests at dinner and over the next day in meaningful and sometimes humorous ways. Uwe and Gabrielle from Berlin assured me they knew a lot about walls. Whenever Uwe saw me looking sullen and withdrawn, he could make me laugh with his perspective about life's darkest moments. Alberto, the Baglio manager, suggested dropping into the American naval base at Sigonella to see if they could help. After her shift, Pina drove me into town with her own car to help me buy another pack. During the ride, she told me her husband, a mechanic, could look at my car. That afternoon, my phone suddenly died, cutting off my critical lifeline to help. Stefania, Alberto's assistant, helped me through the confusing process of loading more Italian minutes by using her own bank account. I reimbursed her with cash. It could have been any one of us, philosophized Matthias, a German businessman. We had each pulled into the parking lot at the same time the previous night with identical cars, supporting the theory that the crooks probably knew which cars were rentals and thereby targeted tourists. At dinner, Sophie pulled out her phone and dialed her tech-savvy husband. Marco told me about the geolocation feature that could trace or freeze my iPad remotely. Everyone provided well-meaning, if not practical, ideas. Ultimately, I accepted the generous offer from Sophie and her dad to accompany them on their way to the airport in Sicily. As if I were an important statesman, they insisted I sit in the front of the car, with Sophie behind the wheel and George giving directions from the back, squeezed in with the luggage. The time flew by as we discussed world politics, the economy, refugees, and walls. During a lighter moment, the endearing family dynamics emerged when they burst out laughing simultaneously upon hearing my use of the heretofore unknown English phrase, backseat driver. They dropped me off at the terminal, but not before exchanging contact info and inviting me to visit them in Bavaria. The painful memories of my very bad Italian day were already beginning to fade and be replaced by more pleasant things when I was jolted out of my daydream. The gate agent thrust a phone to my ear and said that Customs and Border Control would like to speak with me. "What are the last 4 digits of your phone number?" the voice asked. I answered correctly. "What is your address?" Again, I aced the pop quiz. All the passengers had boarded the jumbo jet, and I ran down the ramp, realizing that I was one lucky guy. The things we remember from years of travel are not the beautiful buildings or delicious foods, but the experiences we have along the way. We gain the most when we're forced to look beyond ourselves and interact with other cultures. I suffered at the hands of one petty thief, but the kindness of other people toward a traveler in need left a far greater impression that would last a lifetime. I gained new friends. My very bad Italian day turned out to be pretty good. Thank you.
Thank you. That was great. And what I liked about it is I'm Sicilian heritage, and I thought that was kind of cool. Yes. So if somebody would like to know more about your work or to get your work, how can they contact you?
I think the best way for contact would be to just go to the website for Brookview Press. It's brookviewpress.com.
Okay, great.
That has information about the publishing company, but there's also a contact us link and an email address on that website. And
Okay,
of course, they
great.
can Google my name also and find any number of articles. A lot of things go directly out to the web nowadays rather than in print in a newspaper or magazine.
Mhm. So do you write every day?
Not necessarily. It depends on the project that I'm working on. If I'm actively involved in a project, then my day tends to start out quietly with writing time. So I'll get up and make coffee and sit in my chair and do compositional work while my mind is kind of coming awake. As the day moves on and things just kind of get a little more hectic in your mind, and you think, oh, I got to do this and I got to do that and I got to get gas in the car and do grocery shopping, then my actual writing time, that's not conducive to my writing time. So later in the day, I'll tend to do business activities, answering emails, making phone calls, and so forth. The actual writing time tends to be concentrated in the morning. And it also tends to be concentrated if I'm working on a particular project. So I read a story at the co-op last week, and that was about a trip in Quebec. So for example, when I was working on that project, I came home from the trip and I sat pretty much continuously for maybe 2 to 3 weeks. It takes me about 3 weeks to do a story such as the one that I just read and most of my stories. And then, yes, so I would sit every morning and kind of work on it.
So some people take pictures, you write stories.
I write stories. I do some.
Right? Right? And so give your contact information one more time.
Sure. My contact information can all be found at the Brookview Press website, and that would be www.brookviewpress, all one word, brookviewpress.com.
Great. So you've been listening to David Drotar, correct? Drotar. And
Sure.
I'm Cynthia Pooler. This is Local Everywhere. So if you like this show, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and pass it on. Thanks, David. And thank you, everybody, for listening and watching. Have a great day.
Thank you.